Episode 4 of Season 2, The Red Dragon and the Gold, refers to Melis the Red Queen and Sunfire the Golden. Green Vagar says, hey, what about me? And I really don't think we should be upsetting her. That is one sneaky grandma, and her bite is fierce. It was an incredibly intense episode with probably the most amazing dragon versus dragon fight, plural, ever seen in a live-action TV show, if not any production. Daemon finds himself at the doors to the throne room of the Red Keep. It's a role reversal from Season 1, Episode 1, when we see him sitting on the throne as young Rhaenyra enters the room. This time, she is the one on the throne, but he can't understand what she's saying. Eventually, he's able to understand that she's speaking High Valyrian, just like they did in that first episode, and something we get quite a lot of in this episode. In that first scene, Daemon gives her a Valyrian steel necklace and refers to how they both own a piece of their ancestry now, his most prominent being Dark Sister, given to him by old King Jaehaerys when he was a teenager. But in the dream, instead of adorning her neck, he draws Dark Sister and cuts through it. The crown hits the floor, reminding us perhaps of when Viserys dropped it while climbing the steps to the throne, only for Daemon to place it back on his head, just as he placed it on Rhaenyra's head in Season 1, Episode 10. Before angrily departing Dragonstone in Episode 2, he reminds her of this in response to the accusations that he was undermining her claim. He awakens with a bloody hand, a proverbial sign of guilt. But as the light of day begins to pour in, the blood vanishes. Sir Simon asks him if he slept well, and though Daemon clearly did not, Sir Simon's tone doesn't indicate sarcasm. Daemon seems to trust him somewhat now. He's been there for weeks. If they were going to kill him, they've had plenty of chances. News has reached them of Cole's movements and success in the Crown Lands, and Sir Simon expects that Cole will head towards Harrenhal soon. Daemon sees a single black goat. Is that goat really there? Black goats are highly symbolic, representing the unseen elements of life, the need to confront one's fears or unresolved issues, interpretations that hit the target squarely in Daemon's case. He meets young Oscar Tully, a boy who is heir to Riverrun and has the title Lord Paramount of the Trident coming to him when his grandfather passes. This is a kid who clearly lives up to the Tully house words: family, duty, honor. When Daemon sarcastically suggests Oscar finish off his infirm grandfather Grover with a pillow over the head, something he believes the Greens did to Viserys, Oscar is shocked. Daemon is frustrated, wondering why they bothered to send a boy with no authority. He says that House Tully is a fish with no head, and though he was rather rude about it, he's got a point. With their leader, Lord Grover, infirm and barely able to speak, and no one acting in his place, the Riverlands are effectively leaderless. He tells them to summon the Blackwoods instead. Before they arrive, Daemon is seen to have another waking dream. Similar to last episode, he sees boots below the crack in his bedroom door and hears the sound of marching. He follows and sees a figure in black with long Valyrian hair holding a torch. The figure stalks with purpose, and Daemon follows. Eventually, the figure tosses the torch aside, and from his stance and gait, he appears to be Aemond. But when the figure turns towards Daemon, we see that it's not Aemond after all. It is now Daemon himself, but wearing Aemond's eye patch and his clothing. This dream seems to acknowledge that Daemon sees his nephew as a mirror image of himself. Even their names are similar. But the dream fades, and he finds himself in the working quarters of Alice Strong? He asks. But she says Rivers. He recognizes this as a bastard name, but does not ask her if she's a bastard of House Strong. Instead, she claims to be a barn owl in human form. It's said lightheartedly, but she might be serious, meaning she might be a skin changer. She certainly has a lot to say about the old gods, pointing out that many people have trouble sleeping in Harrenhal because it's cursed. Harren the Black cut down a grove of weirwood trees, she says, and the bed Daemon is sleeping in is carved from one of those trees. Alice teases him, asking if he's seen anything of note, and we know he has. She seems to understand he's been fighting with Rhaenyra and needles his pride in pointing out that he is now bowing to a girl he bounced on his knee. Is this insight the supernatural? Or maybe both. She gives him a drink to help with his sleep, or his dreams, and help with his dreams might not mean what he thinks. Is this weirwood paste the same that is given to Bran to help with his dreams? Weirwood paste is red, and like the dream blood on his hands earlier, we can see red on her fingers too, and she licked some of it off. It's a classic case of "and one for the doctor." She even has weirwood leaves on her apron. As he drinks, the scene cuts back to the hall where he's now seated beside Willem Blackwood. a man who, as a boy, we saw kill Gerald Bracken back in Season 1. After the death of Lord Samwell Blackwood in the Battle of the Burning Mill, Sir Willem is now regent to his nephew Benjicott. He tells Daemon that if he brings the Queen's justice to the Brackens, the Blackwood army is his. Daemon is very disoriented, either from the drink, the continued lack of sleep, or both. But this is basically what he wanted to hear, though he can barely respond, because he sees another ghost, his deceased wife Laena, the previous rider of Vhagar and mother of Baela and Rhaena. At one point he looks to the side, though, and sees a group of hunting dogs, and we're perhaps meant to wonder, like the Black Goat, if they're really there. Over at King's Landing, Larys tells an angry King Aegon that Harrenhal is beyond Daemon's capacity, and he might be right, at least so far. Meanwhile, Alicent is also having a special beverage prepared, though she tells Grand Maester Orwyle it's for some other pregnant girl. The scene begins with her holding Viserys' stone dragon and dropping it when she hears a knock on the door. This is a callback to Viserys dropping that very same dragon back in Season 1, Episode 2. Alicent has that dragon repaired for him, symbolically making him and the House of the Dragon whole again. But now, once again, it is broken, foreshadowing the war that shatters the House of Dragons, such as during the battle at the end of this episode. Larys comes to visit her and notices the moon tea on the table, making sure to stare at it long enough to make sure Alicent knows he saw it, cause only moon tea is ever in that particular container, right? He brings up Sir Criston's safety, somewhat suggesting he knows about their relationship. But he also says it's a sin to deny one's pleasure, indicating, he's not really against it. Larys also takes note of the books she has lying around. Books of history, certainly, and perhaps prophecy. He pointedly asks her about Viserys, and she deflects again, saying intentions do not matter now. War is happening, and the winner will sit the throne. This seems to be what Larys wanted to hear, and she knows it. He closes the book, seemingly putting the topic to rest. But Alicent is later seen looking for Viserys' books in her son's quarters, so the topic is not, in fact, at rest. Not for her. While looking at books and having moon tea, Alicent missed counsel. And quite a scene. Aemond dictates strategy to the council and reveals he's been in communication with Criston Cole directly in secret, going around king and council. Aegon becomes angry that he was not consulted or told, but Aemond embarrasses him by responding in High Valyrian, which Aegon can barely speak. The king shakes with impotent rage. And in a story where revenge dominates, this might be payback for that brothel scene last episode. It was a major power move at the least, but when Alicent asks Larys what she missed at council, he basically shrugs and speaks briefly and only of Aegon's anger regarding Harrenhal, completely omitting the scene between her sons and the reveal of Cole and Aemond's private plan. Sneaky. Rhaenys returns to the shipyards on Driftmark and introduces herself to Alan, praising him for saving her husband and for his good looks. She then confronts Corlys, saying she knows who Alan is, without directly telling the audience what that means, and that his heroism should be celebrated. This upsets Corlys, but the topic changes quickly to the war. With Mysaria watching from above like Larys has so many times, the Black Council scolds the Queen's absence and mourns Cole's successes. Baela reports that he's been moving at night, but she believes they're still in the Crown Lands, not yet heading for Harrenhal and Daemon, who they have still not heard from. Corlys arrives and silences the arguments. For now. Later in the episode, Rhaenyra returns, quite ready to fight after all, hoping to catch the Greens by surprise with her sudden shift in tone, but Cole and Aemond outthink her. Back in King's Landing, Aegon outthinks only himself. He is triggered by praise of Aemond and Vhagar and storms out of the council chamber only to hear from his mother that he should be learning from them if he wants to be half the man his father was. Another one of his triggers. So instead of doing nothing like he's told, he tries to do everything while drinking heavily, as he has all season. Drinking and flying isn't any less dumb than drinking and driving. Before the Battle of Rook's Rest, we got a grim scene at Duskendale. The city wall down, bodies strewn about, Sir Gawain with blood on his face and no hint of his usual humor, and the execution of Lord Darkland, father to Rhaenyra's Queensguard knight Sir Stefan. You really feel for the soldiers who see their lord die bravely while naming Cole Kingmaker. They are forced to join his army or join him in death, and many will die anyway at Rook's Rest, killed by arrow or dragonfire or dragonfoot. Sir Criston appears to be far more competent as hand at war than as Kingsguard, so far. Though Aegon called it a pathetic prize, there are many and more strategic reasons to attack Rook's Rest. One, it sends a message that even smaller castles, to quote the show's marketing, must choose. Two, the castle belongs to House Staunton, one of the lords who sits on Rhaenyra's council, and they want to make loyalty to Rhaenyra costly to reduce her support. Three, it is the final safe port in Blackwater Bay, one the Blacks can't afford to lose. Which brings us to the trap. They knew Rhaenyra would send a dragon, and that dragon, whoever it was, would be smaller than Vhagar. They hoped she would come, herself on Syrax, and she almost did. They would have been content with Jace on Vermax, though that idea was shot down just as quickly by the queen herself, who instead takes him aside to tell him of the Song of Ice and Fire. As she tells him of Aegon the Conqueror and the icy horrors to come, Rhaenys prepares Meleys to fly. There are parallel scenes of Aegon getting ready to mount Sunfire, showing us that both riders love their dragons. They're really setting us up for the sadness here, aren't they? You might ask, well, what was the Greens' plan if the Black sent multiple dragons? Well, that's why we do a full 2-hour podcast every week to discuss all the permutations, characters, strategies, dreams, backstory, lore, what ifs, and what's to come. But actually, a second dragon did show up, and chaos reigned from above, as well as fire and blood, including dragon blood, which is highly acidic. Of course, we're talking Sunfire. He arrives just after Meleys has strafed the hapless conscripts a few times. It would have been great timing if he had a bigger dragon, or knew what he was doing, or wasn't drunk. Aegon is as good at speaking High Valyrian as he is in dragon-to-dragon combat, apparently. He yells, "Forward, Sunfire, faster!" While Aemond and Rhaenys, this sounds so much cooler with words like Angos, which means attack. One word he does know is Dracarys, but he uses it at the wrong time. As soon as Sunfire unleashes a gout of flame, we can see from his perspective that not only did he do it too soon, it caused him to lose sight of his foe, a near-fatal mistake. Meleys dove below the flame and circled around into Sunfire's blind spot. And when the fire clears, Aegon's looking around, he can't see her, but shortly after he feels her slam into them from below. The damage is terrible, and Sunfire nearly hits the ground before a last-second recovery, their wings beating so fiercely that it kicks up dust. The two dragons re-engage as Vhagar ominously emerges from hiding like a grandma arriving late to a surprise party. Aegon briefly believes it's a reprieve, only for Aemond to say Dracarys. Now, whether his aim was better than his brother's depends on who he was aiming for, which is an open question as of now, but the King and Sunfire certainly take the brunt of it, screaming as one as they plummet earthwards, this time unable to stop their fall, crashing into the trees below, fire bursting forth. Rhaenys could have fled, but she turns back to fight again with a look on her face that says she knows this might be the last time. Meleys and Vhagar come together as we see the size disparity from the soldier's point of view. Despite taking terrible wounds, Meleys' superior agility allows her to break free just before the entangled dragons hit the ground. Meleys and Rhaenys scan the skies and ground, but Vhagar landed well and was able to quickly return to the air after some slow-mo stomping. It appears Aemond led his clever girl to the face of the cliffs and dove off, then waited below for the final strike. It's as brutal and sad as it is cunning. And lucky for the Greens, too. In a scene reminiscent of her namesake Queen Rhaenys, Rider of Meraxes, the queen who never was his dragon Meleys lands on the wall of Rook's Rest, breaking it. Until that, the ground battle had basically stopped. Everyone was just watching the dragons. But in the distance, as Cole struggles to regain consciousness, we hear Sir Gawain Hightower ordering their remaining soldiers into the breach to take the castle. Cole goes in search of the king and finds Aemond already there, just as he's sheathing his sword. Together they find a badly broken but still breathing Sunfire near a mass of steel and flesh that appears to be the king. Conveniently, the cat's paw dagger of ice and fire is lying right at the crater's edge. Aemond takes it and walks off as Cole drops to his knees, victorious as Hand, but a failure as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Again. The battle was horrifying and brutal, and like the Battle of the Burning Mill, which side can truly claim victory? This is why a War of Dragons is a thing to be avoided at all costs, and why it's such an amazing spectacle. The sound design team gets a lot of credit here, and Ramin Djawadi, always. There was an immense amount of tension, and they actually made us feel sorry for dragons, and probably will again. Make sure to catch History of Westeros' full podcast episode where everything here and much more is discussed in greater detail, and check out our preview episodes filled with predictions and guesses and theories, but never leaks. Valar Rereadus.